So, welcome aboard, everybody. I'm here with great privilege to have another of my fantastic friends, Ed. Ed is Director of Maintenance for a US-based tech company operating 3 Gulfstreams. But Ed and I used to work together at Nissan, or Nissan, as you guys call it over there. Nissan North America. A few years back, we had 6 aeroplanes, Gulfstreams, Challengers, and a Hawker 125. And we were all having a wonderful time until poor old Carlos Ghosn got himself arrested off a flight that I was actually part of, landing in Tokyo. And I don't know, 7 months later, I think it was, they made the decision to basically get rid of all the aeroplanes. And we all had to move on for new adventures. So Ed and I are going to talk about his fantastic 5C model, about how to approach any maintenance input, or for that matter, anything in life. And welcome aboard, Ed. Lovely to see you.
Thanks, Ben. Great to be here.
Great. Ed, just give us a little bit of a background to your amazing career. I mean, I never fail to think, blimey, you've just done that as well. And it's so impressive. But just give us a couple of minutes of what you've been up to.
Well, I think we'll title it Dumb Luck, because there was no grand master plan, that's for sure. No, I was a military brat. My dad was a West Point grad. We moved all over when I was a kid. And when I was in high school, he got quite sick and we lost him. So college never really became an option for me. So I recall the summer of whatever it was, 82, I guess, 81, 82. I didn't have any direction. I was graduating high school. And so I went down on a whim and joined the Marine Corps, right? Just to have something to do. And so I got sent to, the Marine Corps boot camp and went into aviation from there and spent 6 years in the military, 2 in active reserve and 4 active duty. Working on A6s, EA6Bs, and P3 Orions. And this is probably before you were born, but yeah, a long time ago. Predominantly West Coast base, worked out of El Toro, California, a couple Westpac tours. But the Marine Corps is great because they kind of take, this useless, directionless kid, and they kind of give them one thing was really good and what I really needed at that time in my life. They tell you what to wear, where to be, what to eat, what to do. I mean, there was no decision making required on the part of an 18-year-old idiot. So that was perfect for me. And, so I spent some time there, and directly out of the Marine Corps, I got out late in 86 from active duty. But I recall it was the 23rd of December in 1986, and I got a job at Continental Airlines. So my separations occurred at about 4 p.m. on the 23rd, and my night shift Continental Airlines mechanic job started that night at 9 o'clock at night. So I had about a 5-hour retirement in between my military service and my commercial excellence. But yeah, I did 6 or 7 years at Continental out of LAX as part of something called a RAM team, which was a rapid action maintenance. So there was a rash at that time. There was a union bust with Frank Lorenzo at the time, and there was a lot of dissension in the ranks, and finances were tough. And this would be 1987. And I think as a result of that, there was a lot of what I'll call hangar rash and ramp rash airplanes. So, my boss and I, our team, all we did was go out in the field and fix damaged airplanes, right? You'd run into it with a belt loader, or they hit the jet bridge, or we had one in Newark where, they had a cowling come off on landing, damaged a Bonarani that landed behind them. People got hurt. Mad scramble not to get the airplane impounded at the gate at Newark. So they one-engine taxied Airbus 300 down to the maintenance hangars in Newark. And I don't know how familiar you are with Airbus hydraulics, but that takes away, I think, the yellow system, which is your accumulator charge system. And so without hydraulics, they had about 4 presses on the brakes. And by the time they got to the ramp over by the hangar, there was no brakes, and they run that thing right into the roof of the building. There's a hole the size of a Jeep. There was a hole the size of a Jeep under the nose. So we went, one of the biggest field trips I ever did for sheet metal repair. But yeah, it was a really interesting career. It was during my time at Continental Airlines that I finished up my A&P license and spent several more years there. And then I had an opportunity to go work for a regional out of Reno Airlines, which was 35 MD-80 type aircraft. And worked my way up the food chain, putting up some leadership, team lead role, and then eventually supervisor role. Had a great crew there, very small family environment. But learned a lot, though, a ton. And from Reno, I went to a very brief stop at the DHL's maintenance control. Was not a good fit. I only spent 3 or 4 months there. And I had a job opportunity with FlexJet out of Dallas, which at this time was very small, probably 29 airplanes. But the business was brand new and growing like crazy. And they brought me in initially to help them bring the Lear 45, which was still in certification process online, and take over the Lear 45 program. FlexJet at the time, I had 20 orders or maybe more for those airplanes. But I got to Flex, and that program was delayed in certification. Surprise, surprise. Have anybody heard this story before? So I had about a year and a half before they were going to show up, and operations director took me under their wing and said, "We think you'd be a good operations manager." So I wound up working on the operations floor, running all the disciplines associated with operating airplanes, maintenance, dispatch, scheduling, crew scheduling, customer facing, etc. And that was wonderful because at FlexJet I learned almost every discipline that has to do with operating airplanes. I mean, even as far as marketing and sales and contracts and finance and revenue.
Wow.
And so it was great. So I really got a broad experience there. And I'm not an expert in any of those fields by any means, but having a little bit of knowledge really helps in all your other decision making. Very fortunate. Was at FlexJet for 17 years. Most of the industry knows they were essentially merged / were bought out by a company called Flight Options Cleveland. They relocated the main corporate headquarters up to Cleveland, and I spent about a year and a half doing some commuting back and forth, working at a senior level there. And it was great. Everybody was gracious. It was a great career there. But I had an opportunity to go to Nissan, where you and I met, whatever it was, 9 or 10 years ago. An old FlexJet guy had taken over the chief pilot role at Nissan. About a year into his job, they were going to expand their fleet from 2 airplanes to 6, and he needed some help. So they offered me a position. I went in and we handled maintenance and scheduling for them. And as you know, Ben, we had a great run there, right? I think I still recall the first time. For those of you listening to the podcast, by the way, so you got to imagine, Ben's not a bad-looking guy, but you got to imagine him 10 years ago. He is like Dr. GQ. And I remember we were in the Tokyo Narita Hilton, and the crew and I were down in the lobby waiting for the chief pilot, or the pilot, the PIC on the mission, which was Ben. And here he comes strolling down the stairs from the second floor, and he's got his jacket flipped over his shoulder. He has a little guitar that he takes with him on the road. He's got his white shirt all silky, unbuttoned down to here, just comes strolling in like Dr. GQ. And the flight attendant looks at me and goes, "God damn." That was my first chance to spend some time with Ben. But yeah, we had. You got the
$1,000 are coming your way, mate. It's coming your way.
No, you were quite the GQ. But Nissan was a great collection of guys.
It was.
Probably eight good old boys from the SEC conference, and a few great guys out of Europe. And so we had 2 airplanes based in Europe, 2 in Nashville, and 2 that roamed the world, mostly Tokyo and Paris. But complex operation, learned a lot there as well.
Yeah.
And one of the nice things about Nissan is they deferred to my judgment from a lot of operations and, of course, all of the maintenance, which was really great, right? You really feel supported when you go to your leadership team and go, I think we need to do this, or I got to spend money on this, or this is going to be an impact. We need downtime for this. And they go, we respect that, and we'll take your word, and we're going to plan that accordingly, right? That's really beneficial for someone in a leadership role, that the people they're working for not only support their decision making, but understand that that's their area of expertise, and they respect you being the SME on that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, and we had the weird Carlos Ghosn thing where, he was trying to move. I believe he was trying to move Nissan and Renault into a merger. I think that wasn't well received in the Japanese culture, to relinquish control of a very big historic company to European control. And so I don't know all the details. I've not been made privy to the legal arguments, but it very much feels like he needed to be put aside so that the Japanese leadership could manipulate control. And one of the responses out of Japan was get rid of the whole fleet. So I was with Nissan on a retention contract to help sell their airplanes. 4.5 years ago, I got a headhunter, reached out and said, you should really go to the West Coast, talk to these people. And I did. And I've been here for 4 years, and it's worked out fantastic. So I'm really grateful to have a good job. I'm really grateful to be surrounded by professionals. And, I spent the bulk of the last 4 years just working on team building and breaking down silos. And it's been well received for the most part. You certainly have challenges, but well received, and unfortunately, the industry is such that if you get a couple people that are divisive, it can really, really negatively impact an operation.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think identifying that and addressing concerns or bridging those gaps is really big to making a successful operation, right? And
I think you're absolutely right, Ed.
I'm sure, but
yeah, absolutely. And that's a good segue, really, because it might turn to blow smoke up your backside as well. But I remember the first time I met you, how confident you came across for not only the job that you're doing, the skill-based job you're doing, but your ability to communicate effectively with people. And it's always refreshing, of course, because a lot of us struggle. I'm still trying to work out how to communicate in the best way possible. But it's clear that you are very geared towards the people-orientated idea, and in a world where huge amounts of money are being outlaid and at risk, any decision, trying to keep on to the human level is really important. And actually, when we've talked about before, we're going to talk about your 5 C's, which I think is really good. I was just gripped when you were telling me about that. I'm adopting those 5 C's, which we're going to talk about now. But you started off by saying that as pilots and techs engineers, we approach things from a different way, the half glass and the half pint. Sorry, half full, the pint half full and the pint half empty perspective, which I thought was really good. So tell us about that.
Well, just to clarify for any regulatory bodies watching, the pint half full and the pint half empty is definitely 12 hours before the bottle and throttle. But yeah, no. But if you think about the perspective is really huge, right? If you think about the perspective of a pilot, right? And I'm not bashing pilots. I have a lot of respect for pilots. It took me a long time to earn it, but I really have a lot of respect. But a pilot's expectation is really, you're going to give me a safe, compliant, good product. And I'm going to go in with my checklist and my operational procedures. And my expectation is that product is going to function exactly like it's supposed to. I'm going to leave on time. The plane's going to fire up. The systems are going to work, and we're going to continue on, right? And the industry as a whole recognizes that that's what pilots are there for, right? But pilots are very well compensated, but they're not well compensated for that specific piece of the mission. They are compensated for the times when that doesn't happen, right? And they have to work outside the norm, right? So if you look at, once again, back to perspective, you look at a pilot's perspective is everything should work. And that's my expectation. And I'm going to plan accordingly and press on accordingly, right? And then, so very glass half full, if you will, right? Expectation. Unless you've got a personality conflict where someone's just very dissatisfied. For the most part, 99% plus, pilots want to go, do the mission, get done right, get the people where they need to be, and then off to the hotel, get a meal, and do it again tomorrow, right? Maintenance, I mean, diametrically opposed, right? Maintenance is glass half full. And it is, okay, what's going to break? How am I going to deal with it? How long is it going to take? What's it going to cost? Who's going to get impacted, right? And so we see that even, so if you take maybe the 3 scenarios a maintenance guy deals with, right? So it's everyday maintenance, an AOG or an interruption, and then scheduled planned maintenance, right? So we'll just start with planned maintenance, right? We say, oh, I'm going to take the airplane down for 3 weeks. It's going into its annual, and I wonder how much stuff they're going to find. I wonder how long it's going to take. Is it going to make its out time? You know, how can I get it turned as quickly as possible? So they're already expecting. Their perspective is there's going to be problems. Not, oh, it's going to breeze through annual and we'll be back in business. They don't perceive it that way, right? And then just the regular AOG. You know, they're like, okay, Ben's flying. I think it's going to work out, but we'll probably have a problem. So where are we going? Oh, we're stopping in Anchorage for fuel, and then we're off to China. Okay, well, what resources do I have? How am I going to deal with? So if you look at it, we're really approaching the game from 2 completely different sides of the pitch, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's key to resolving, you know, and working through AOGs and working through operational interruptions, that you find you have to work towards something common ground between the pilots and the mechanics, right? Or engineers, as you guys in Britain would say. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Pilots very black and white, checklist oriented. I'm going to bam, 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 and it's all going to come together. Maintenance, you know, oh my gosh, I want to fix things. I expect things to break, and I'm just waiting for the next problem, right? So perspectives are completely different, right? So, and I did a little like discourse in my head. So you got a pilot, right? He's going to go, everything's working. I'm fine. Or it's not working, and someone else is going to resolve it for me.
Sure.
So, maintenance guy is, gosh, I really hope the pilot doesn't mess anything up. And if he does, I got to deal with it, right? So you're sort of divided at the start, right? And there's no symbiosis to that relationship. And what's interesting enough that if you do have an operational interruption, it kind of forces you to work together. You may not like it, you may not get along, but by the nature of the event, you're forced to be partnered, right? And so I've been kind of mulling in my head how to make that partnership stronger and how to make it mutually respectful and beneficial. for the ultimate outcome of resolving the issue and moving on with the business, right? And I've come up with a program we talked about the other day, which is kind of the 5C program. It's my 5 C's to partnering for techs and pilots, right? And I'm not a psychologist major. I'm not a genius. My experience of 42 years in aviation has been, if you can kind of get everybody to see their different perspectives and how they affect the outcome and how working together can really drive a more elegant solution that's mutually beneficial to the people in the back, the people in the front, the people at home at base.
That's a beautiful word to use. Elegant. I love that. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, makes sense.
So, I've got a couple notes here, and I have to refer back and forth because I'm not a young man anymore, Ben. I just approached my 6th century.
You only look 21, mate. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we're going to talk a little bit about it in a bit. But Viraj, as you know, was on the podcast that actually came out yesterday. And we were talking about our lightning strike over the South China Sea, which is quite a dramatic event. And you were very much involved in that. And I've thought about that since we talked about your 5 Cs and how you inputted that, because it was quite a big thing to be able to deal with. So maybe we can talk about that in terms of your 5 Cs. But so what's the first one, which is it's so obvious, isn't it? But so few people actually understand it.
All right. So I think you touched on this a couple of your podcasts to date there, but my first C is calm, complete calm, right? And that is, physiologically speaking, we're designed for fight and flight, right? There's an amygdala, it releases theta waves, and our immediate reaction to any crisis or any attack or any negative impact on our lives is fight or flight, right? So that is a very emotional, non-logical response. And if you study biology here, if you're familiar with the physiology of the human, if you allow 10 to 30 seconds, depending on the person, for the theta waves to release, calm down, and for the other areas of your prefrontal cortex to release beta and alpha waves, then you allow the cognizant, logical processing center in your brain to say, okay, let me assess what's going on here, right? So, remaining, when I say calm, I don't mean, feet up on the dashboard calm. I mean, there's something going on, but I don't need to respond immediately, and I don't need to respond emotionally. And I'll give you the caveat that especially for pilots, there are going to be times where you have to respond immediately, just by nature of what you do for a living. But those responses are what all CRM and recurrent training are about, is your rote memorization response, right? I have this whistle, I got this red light, I know, because I've trained for this, that my first response is flick this button to off, transfer to this system, level flight, climb, whatever, right? So when I say calm, I don't mean, take time in a crisis emergency situation. But when you're dealing with a mechanical interruption or an operational interruption, that's not flight critical. Take a moment and calmly say, okay, I have an issue, and I know my initial response is going to be reactive and emotional, so I'm going to pause and allow that time to elapse so that I can get to the part of my brain that does logical thinking and assessment, right? So calm is critical to me, right? It's also super important, whether you're the guy on the phone at base getting the call about the problem, or you're the guy or gal sitting up front driving the airplane. What's really important is for everyone to understand, you are fully qualified to be where you currently are right now, right? If you're not, there's a problem with the system, not a problem with you. And so you cannot begin to second guess your capabilities or the people that are with you's capabilities or the people that are on the phone with you. You have to acknowledge and trust that the systems that are put in place to qualify those people are robust enough that they're where they should be and qualified to be there, right? Yeah. And so you take away that doubt about, I got Ed on the phone, I got a mechanical problem, and Ed doesn't know shit. So you got to trust that Ed picked up the phone as your qualified technician and says, I have some suggestions and some information. I can share some technical detail that will help you, right? And same for me. I should say, no one else has this problem. Ben's flying. So that I can't take that approach. I have to say, all right, Ben, you're qualified to be there. I trust your judgment. Let's talk through what we got, right? So it's really critical. That calm piece is really critical in my moment, right? And I think you could sum that up by saying just don't have an immediate emotional reaction to a situation.
I think
Pause,
that's
remain
exactly.
calm.
Yes, as you're saying, the awareness that what I picked up there was you said, I know I'm going to be caught emotionally. And I think that's such a big thing. It sounds obvious, but to say, I know in this situation, I'm feeling my heart raise, my senses are triggering certain feelings, my amygdala is starting to kick in, which is the sloppy basic response of let's get the hell out of here or let's beat the hell out of it just to survive. We've got to give ourselves that space. It's so important, isn't it? And there's so often that we react immediately, impulsively, compulsively as well. And that's absolutely the key to setting up the structure for a successful outcome. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Well, and you know, if you take another step, if you do respond emotionally and react immediately, often the resolution still comes, right? But there's a potential there for serious problems, right? If you're not logically assessing a situation and your initial gut reaction is to do this, you know, if you're a good pilot, you've been around a long time. If you're a good mechanic, you've been around a long time. That may be a fine outcome, right? Shoot from the hip. But it's my judgment that if you take that time just to calmly assess where you're at, right? And I'll give you can I give you an analogy, because it's football season. We're a couple of weeks here in the U.S. away from the Super Bowl. But I watched a game yesterday with my wife, and we talk about, if you can imagine, right? You're in the middle of the division championship game, right? And you're a running back for team A or B, right? And you can't imagine how much the adrenaline's got to be flowing and how keyed up and amped up you are, right? And you get the quarterback gets the ball, he turns, he hands it off, and this guy is full bore, grabs the ball and starts charging toward the line. And if you watch, I don't know if you're an NFL fan, Ben, I'm sure you're a soccer and rugby guy, but if you watch good running backs, and keep in mind, they're keyed up, they're on edge, right? Their emotions and their adrenaline, everything is flowing, you know, in the red, needle in the red. They get to a good running back, if the play hasn't quite developed, is not going to put his head down and just charge through anyway. And you watch a good running back, he will dash a line and pause and give it that extra moment for the blocking plan and the hold to open. And some of the best running backs have that stutter step pause. And I think from a physiological standpoint, that's amazing. If you imagine all those emotional and chemical and biological things that are going on right then in that moment of time, to be able, with 70,000 people watching in the stands and 50 million watching on TV, and, you know, the noise and the elevated emotions of the game, to be able to charge up to line and go, I need to pause 3 milliseconds for this to open and then go. And some of the best and most successful running backs have that skill, right? And I liken that to, I'm in the cockpit and I have an emergency situation. You know, take that brief pause. I'm not saying take a nap. I'm saying take a brief pause and assess. And I want to give you some shout out, right? Because calm is really pertinent to the conversation we had the other day. And I was a DOM at Nissan. Ben and Viraj were flying over the South China Sea. We thought we were above the weather, but there was some pretty nasty stuff. And I got a call middle of the night and says, "Oh, Ed, we just totally calm, cool, James Bond-esque." You called me and said, "Hey, we were flying along at 41 and we lost several thousand feet with a downdraft. We got hit by lightning. There's a hole in the nose. We got to Jakarta and we're on the ground. The airplane's got all kinds of damage." I mean, totally unemotional, totally Spock-like. So my hat goes off to you, right? My hat goes off to you. I think the flight attendant hurt her leg as well, right? Was that the one where she hurt her leg?
No, that was, that was, no, well,
yeah.
That was a different one.
Yeah, we'll go without names, but yeah, you might want to edit the names out there. But yeah, so just say again. Oh, we lost whatever, 2,000 or 4,000 feet in 2 seconds and got hit by lightning badly and some damage to the airplane, systems problems, and we landed in Jakarta and the people are on their way, but now we got to deal with the problem. And the fact that you were unemotional, shared your information with me, I mean, that's just absolutely perfect example of calm, right? And you guys were dealing, why don't you talk to it? You guys were dealing with a lot of crap up there.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, it's one of those things that it was a very dramatic, emotional time. And a bit like you, it reminds me of Viktor Frankl, who was the author who wrote Man's Search for Meaning from the Holocaust camps. He survived, all his family died, and he basically, one of his famous sayings, I paraphrase it a little bit, saying, in between stimulus and response is a space, and in that space lies our power to make a choice, and in that choice lies our growth and our freedom. And I think that's the thing. So when we were on the ground there, I was thinking, okay, yeah, it was an immediate reaction to something quite dramatic, but was I overplaying it in my memory? So I didn't want to come in and say, "Hey, Ed, hey man, we got smashed all over the place and we're goddamn heroes." I didn't. I want to think, actually, was it as bad as I thought it was? And you said, "Well, take some pictures and send them through." And I took some pictures of the nose. It looked like a couple of bits of paint had just come off. And he came back and you phoned up and he said, "Mate, you are not going anywhere. You've been hit by lightning 4 times, and we've got to get some serious tech on this. And it was really interesting. Anyway, so lead us into the second. What was the second C?
It's conscious, and I use the word conscious in relation to everyone who flies, operates airplanes, sports airplanes, etc. Understand there's like a series of things, a ripple effect to any operational interruption, right? And let's take it from a pilot's perspective. I'm not a pilot, never been a pilot, but been around the industry for 42 years. And I get a feel for some of the things you're dealing with up front. But immediate response to operational interruption, one of the immediate responses would be, okay, I got to go deal with the person in the back and tell them what's going on, right? Which is not a pleasant place to be. Nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news, especially if it looks like, you're really not going to finish meet their expectations for the day. So conscious, when I say conscious, if you look at the ripple effect to an operational interruption, there's maintenance, there's dispatch, there's scheduling, crew scheduling, hotels, cars. On the customer side, there's their itinerary, their commitments, et cetera. So there's a ripple effect that things are going to be negatively impacted for an operational error. And conscious to me means I'm aware of those things, but that's not what's going to drive my response to this problem, right? And I think conscious, you really have to acknowledge, yes, there's going to be rework. People are going to have to do extra. Maybe another crew needs to come with a new airplane, whatever. And yes, the principal is going to be impacted. He may be emotional and he may miss a meeting or she may miss a meeting or whatever. But it's critical for you to say, I'm conscious of those things, but that is not my priority right now, right? That will come in time when we get to logistics down the road here. But right now, you have to acknowledge to yourself there's going to be a ripple effect. But right now, I'm going to focus on how to deal with this and resolve this issue, right? So to me, conscious is huge, right? And the inconvenience that this operational interruption causes should never, ever drive your response to the specific problem, right? There's a point down the road where we have to take it into account and say, all right, what are our options? What solutions can we provide? But for right now, I think conscious says, I'm going to put all these things in check and deal with this issue, right? So we're going to remain calm and we're going to consciously acknowledge operational, customer, support, maintenance are impacted by this. But right now I'm going to focus on the issue itself. Yeah. So you start calm, conscious, and then we begin to communicate, right? And this is really, in my opinion, the absolute most critical piece of the puzzle here, communication. Absolutely. Right? And once again, we kind of tend to go with perspectives, right? Pilot's perspective is, this thing isn't working like it should, right? And then the maintenance perspective would be, well, it was working fine when I gave it to you, and I don't have this problem with other people. But those are not the things we want to see, right? What we want to see is you are finally reaching a point where your needs and your expectations come together as two differing perspectives, right? A pilot says, I got a broke airplane. I really want to resolve it and either continue or find a solution to the person in the back of the airplane. And inversely, the mechanic's like, okay, we definitely have a problem, and I really want to resolve it and get this airplane back in service. So you're finally getting to a point where your needs and your desires are aligning, right? Versus the glass half full, glass half empty thing. And I kind of think that's critically, right? Because that's critical to the process, because now you're almost forced by the nature of the event to become a team and to rely on each other, because you can't be successful without each other. You have things I need. I have things you need. So what better than to put our arm around each other and let's walk through it together, right? So if you look at it from a pilot perspective, it's like, from a pilot perspective, they're going to be, all right, how long will this take? What do I tell the passengers, right? What are my options? And the tech perspective is, what do I need? What do I share with the passengers? How long is it going to take? What are my options? So like I said, you're finally coming together with your expectations, right? Yeah. And that's for the first time in this 5-step process that you're actually sort of reading from the same script as a pilot and a technician. And so that's wonderful, right? That's the turnkey that flips a switch on, we're now a team. You're not ops, I'm not maintenance. We're issue resolution team, right? So, and I think that's huge. And I think what's really, really important during the communication phase is that you've got to make an extra effort on both sides of the fence to not look for blame, to not imply that someone misstepped, and to give the people that you're dealing with the professional credence that they deserve, right? If you did something wrong, or if the tech side did something wrong in preparation and getting the airplane ready for you, that's not relevant right now. What's relevant right now is Together, you're going to work through this issue and move the ball forward, right? And I can't caution everybody, front of the plane, back of the plane, on the off support floor, whatever. Don't look to assign blame. There's going to be time to go assess what happened and why, and if training's required or whatever. But that's down the road. It's not important right now.
Yeah,
and
I think the point is that you talked about it before, haven't you? Whether you mentioned it before, but the blame thing. And if we start pointing the fingers at each other, communication breaks down, and it's not good. It doesn't lead to any mission success at all.
We're calm, we're conscious, and we're starting to communicate with each other. And I want to go through some of the conversations that probably anybody that's being completely honest with themselves have had in their own head. There's not necessarily things you voice, but things that you've had in your head. And I'll do pilot, and then I'll do tech engineer perspectives, right? So pilot's perspective is, why can't maintenance get this right? Do these people know what they're doing? This is the third time it's happened and they're not listening, right? So those are some of the conversations probably go through the heads of pilots, especially with the nuisance computer-based airplanes these days, right? And the maintenance person or the engineer on the other side is going through his head, oh my God, it worked fine when I gave you the airplane, and we never see this with any other pilot in the seat. If you take those in context, right, you can mull those about in your head, but they're not productive to this conversation, right? And you have to have the awareness to say, you're qualified to be where you are. I'm qualified to be where I am, and we're going to collectively work through this as a team. And if you read between the lines of those kind of quotes, there's an undertone of implication or a tendency towards blame, right? And that's what we really want to avoid in this stage, right? I don't care if you did something wrong. I don't care if I did something wrong. Let's resolve this issue, and then we can revisit those in a much more controlled environment down the road. It's super important that you don't assign blame and don't implicate someone in as a responsible party for what happened, So once again, teamwork, we can resolve this together, right, as partners. So that's the communication piece. And then if you look at what techs are looking for, right, techs are very detail-oriented. I had a guy that worked for me years ago, super smart, really high engineer level kind of way of approaching things. And he used to be a state trooper for Connecticut in his first career. And he likened an AOG or an operational interruption to a crime scene. And I thought it sounds kind of odd, but if you think about it, it's a fantastic analogy, right? From a maintenance perspective, you have an issue. So I want to take all my mental yellow cones and my crime scene tape and put it up. Don't touch any of the evidence, but collect as much data as you can. What was your flight profile? Were you climbing? How much fuel was, what was the exact issue? Give me the message. What's the fault code? Was there anything else going on? Did you have weather? Did you have wind shear? Right? So these are all pertinent pieces of information that if we're at our crime scene, right, we're put our little detective hats on. The maintenance guy he's like the forensic dude, right? He wants to get all these little pieces of evidence and then mesh them together into a cognizant story of what actually happened, right? And this is not a shot at pilots, but pilots are very checklist, resolve this issue, move on to the next task sort of approach. So they may not have that holistic view. So when a maintenance guy's paying you, hey, get me more information. What was this? What was that? What were the readings? What did the gauge say? Whatever. They're not doing that to be a pain in the ass. They're doing that because they're the crime scene guy. They are trying to collect all the data and make that assessment. So when you're communicating and you're experiencing the issue with an airplane, make it a point to kind of be situationally aware and gather as much information as you think you might need to share later, because that will make the team effort to resolve it much better in the future. So communication. Also, be honest, right? And if you did, in fact, make an error, or if the tech thinks he missed a step or didn't give you a good be honest with each other, not from a blame perspective or a implication perspective, but, hey, Ben, by the way, I noticed that thing when I was doing my pre-flight, but we got it reset, and it's not we didn't think it was a big deal, and you got it now. So, but there's no apology. No getting angry. That's a great way to approach the game of golf as well. No apologies, no getting angry. But I think if you kind of take that tack where I may have not managed this right, or I may not set up my configuration of the cockpit right, or the tech says, I noticed that on pre-flight, but I didn't think it was a big deal. It's fine to acknowledge that, but not for the purpose of saying, then it's Ed's fault and I'm out of the weeds. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to communicate all the information, right, and do it openly and earnestly in a teamwork approach. So. Then, that's the point where we want to kind of get a robust and inclusive discussion to exchange all the information. And then that's our starting point for how to resolve it, right? And then as every pilot knows and as every technician knows, there's a multitude of avenues to go down, right? And our ace up our sleeves is we can always stop. stop the entire operation, right? And that is the most compliant, most safe stance you can possibly take. Doesn't take into consideration customer satisfaction or economics or logistics, but if everybody's uncertain, or even if one party's uncertain, that's a fine position to take. But don't get to that position without looking at the choices available to you and the potential options to resolve, continue, or take an airplane out of service. And, don't make that immediate jump to, I can't go anywhere, or you're not going anywhere, right? There's always alternative solutions. We have to find them that fall within the bounds of compliance and fall within the bounds of crew and technician consideration and comfort level, right? So, but don't immediately jump to, oh, we're doomed and I'll be at the hotel. Call me when it's fixed, or you're screwed, and you're like, no, I think I can work through it. No, oh no, you can't go anywhere. You're broke. Talk through it and collectively reach that opinion, right? And don't be afraid to reach out. When we talk about communication, don't be afraid to reach out to additional resources, right? Like your scheduling and dispatch, like another technician, like a technical operations center expert, or a chief pilot you knew from training, or someone in your department that's really savvy on this particular problem or this particular system. Those are all resources, right? And the team can come together, even outside and beyond the scope of the tech and the pilot, to say, okay, now I've gathered all the information. I have all the options, and I'm in a position where I can present solution options to the principal, to the operations group, to the planning team, to the maintenance team. And then from there, we can move on to the following step, right? Which is cooperation, right?
Yeah.
And that's Ben and I are talking. You're broken really hard in wherever we were, Jakarta. There's a hole in the nose of the airplane. I mean, we kind of came to the conclusion unemotionally that hole in the radome is probably a grounding item. We're not going anywhere. And you said, okay, let us know how we can help. And I said, let me get started on logistics. And that's where we began the cooperative part. I'm like, Ben, we got a tech coming out tomorrow. He's going to take a look. Can you help him escort get to the airplane? Those are the cooperative things in the resolution process that are super important, right? And I say that, like, don't tell the pilot, okay, I'll go to the hotel. I don't need you anymore, right? Tell the pilot, these are the things I'm going to do now as a result of this interruption. And these are the roles you could play if you can help support me. And the pilot should, on the flip side of that is the pilot shouldn't say, well, I guess you're right. I guess we're broke. We'll be at the hotel. We're going to go have dinner, and call me when it's fixed. It's not a call me when it's fixed. We own it together, right? And I think that teamwork sort of spirit, that cooperative spirit, is really going to be hugely impactful on resolving the issue, right? Whether it be get the airplane fixed and back in service, get the deferral in place, note the glitch, reset the system, press on, whatever that solution is. So, but it's got to be done in a cooperative, we are a team approach. And that leads me to the final one, right, which is coordination, right? And that would require me getting parts going, you finding a tech and helping escort him on the field, unlocking the airplane, powering up a system for him. That cooperation is, that coordination is sort of the logistics pieces, if you will, to put the puzzle together. Right. So if we recap, right, and I feel like we spent way too much time on the 5 Cs, but we've got stay calm, be conscious that there's a ripple effect, but that's not the driver of your decision making now. Communicate the issue openly, clearly, honestly, with trust and faith in the person you're dealing with in both directions. Cooperate to the extent you can based on your circumstances. Like if I say, oh, Ben, we've seen this before, and I need you to shut down system A and fire it back up or reset the computer, cooperate, right? If you say, hey, can you dig up the details? Is there any history on this? I should go dig in the details, get you the history. Those are cooperative efforts, right? And that is team building. And then finally, coordination, right? And that's when we get to the logistics of how to resolve the problem, right? Or not, we've already decided how to resolve it. It's the logistics of putting those pieces in place. And that may not need you for anything. I may need you for everything, right? I mean, stay with the airplane, keep it powered up. I got a tech coming. They're not going to be here till tomorrow. Go get some dinner in a hotel, and can you come back out? Tech side, hey, can you give me the history? Have we ever seen this? Talk to the tech ops center, whatever. Those are cooperative efforts. And I think if you take that sort of 5C approach, and it's not the end all be all, but I think you'll find that your experience with co-owning the issue will be much more positive from a quality of life and a liberating feeling of, we collectively had this issue, we collectively resolved it, and the outcome was safe, compliant, and satisfactory, right? And you'll notice I didn't say economically good, I didn't say customer satisfaction good. The keys there are safe, compliant, and satisfactory, right? And that's what we're looking for at the end of the day. And I think I made a quote to you last week when we were talking before this. I made a quote to you as a maintenance person, and I hope every pilot's okay with this as well. As a maintenance person, I kind of have a saying, and that's, I would much rather tell you no right now, regardless of the ripples, than to tell your spouse I should have said no. Right?
That's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And so, and please don't approach these issues as like is this a defensible position in court? Approach the issues logically and reasonably, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of latitude in the regs as far as the pilot authority. There's a lot of latitude in the regs as far as the releasing, controlling companies are operational control authority as well. That, and what I'll call gray area. So don't rule those out. Talk through them and make sure there's a comfort level and there's a feeling of compliance and solutions that are reasonable and explainable. But don't go up there going, I'm not going to do this because if I ever got called to court, I'd have to explain this. Well, talk through that before you even get to that point. So,
yeah, I think that's brilliant, mate.
Enough about airplanes. Yeah. Enough about airplanes, man. I mean, and if you look at these sort of steps, they apply. Let's say your kid fell down, flew off the swing set in the backyard, broke his arm. This is not a bad approach for that. You're an offender bender on your way to work. This is not a bad approach, right? Remain calm. Be conscious there's a ripple. You're late for work. I got to call mentor. Calm, conscious. Communicate, cooperate, coordinate. And that's how you can deal with a lot of things in life with these sort of 5-step approach, that mantra, right? But we get so emotional. We get so wrapped up in it. And, oh my God, the principal's going to be mad. Oh my God, I'm going to miss my airline. Oh my gosh, I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, whatever. And that shouldn't be the principal concern. The principal concern is working through it.
Yeah, exactly. I think really that's your interpretation. We're very much into our self-development. We understand the neuroscience, the limbic system and the neocortex and why all the neurochemicals are pumping around the body. The modern phrase for it all is emotional intelligence, and calm stands for the awareness. The first thing we do in emotion, and the classic model of emotional intelligence is calm, just self-awareness effectively. Then consciousness, well, this is where I am. How is it going to affect everybody else? Then we can start to regulate our responses and our behavior rather than just to react impulsively or just compulsively in the same way as we've always done before. And then we can start working together with both sides of our brain, the half glass full and the half glass empty, because we're going to have that. We need that in order to survive life generally. We'll work that in our own brains, and then we can come together and coordinate not only with our different sides of the brain, but the different team members as well. If I think, for example, in terms of coordination and communication, in private life or in professional life, in flying, whatever, the people that are least confident are the ones who are the micromanagers. So I've flown with pilots before and there's been a problem and they want to solve the tech problem because they don't feel confident. They don't trust the techs, not because the techs aren't good. They just have this fear that things are going to go wrong. They're half glass full. And I just think you're really overcomplicating here. You've got an amazing team that you can pull together, and we've got to trust each other at the end of the day. The other person which gets least mention is the flight attendant in the back. So coaching, for me, the benefit of coaching is that we are able to communicate our own thoughts to somebody who may not have been in that arena, may not understand the technical side of the skill level, that the particular skill which we're talking about. But the flight attendants in the back there, if I've got a bit of a problem, I will always go and talk to them to get their objective opinion about how I'm coming across. Am I shutting down my thought processes? Am I becoming too emotional about this situation? Am I becoming too blasé about it? And I think they're an absolute valuable resource. They are so intrinsic to our operation. It's just not about serving food to very high-end VIPs. It's really about keeping me sane and us as a crew sane. I think this is the importance of coordination together, communication coordination, and then and the last C, I would add number six, but I think that's part of the process, is just continue to review, because we do that in our door-to-door model and flying. The last item, it's determine what are the options, what are the risks, let's decide, let's act, and then we review at the end, and that's the big thing, isn't it? Reflection, review, everything is really important. So
yeah,
it can be applied to everything.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that too. You do the Monday morning quarterback thing and say, well, how could we have dealt with this better? Ideally you go through it and say, well, no, we there's nothing we could have done better, right? But yeah, it's every opportunity, every interruption, every mechanical is an opportunity to learn something, not just personally from a career perspective or your technical knowledge, but from a policy and from an operations perspective on how to manage change and manage dynamic flux in the schedule in the future, right? And you talked. It's kind of interesting. Two things came to mind there. One, I had a tech who was talking. We had a glass half full, glass half empty conversation years ago in my career, and the tech. I think he just made it up on the spot, but I thought it was pretty pertinent. And you see it, glass half full, and I see it glass half empty. And the pilot was really having a tough time. He had a very angry principal in the back, and the tech said, "Hey, if I pour my glass in yours, we got a full pint." And I thought that was just like, what a great icebreaker, right? In a very stressful situation, right? And I think he added like, oh, and you sound like you could use a pint right now or something like that, just so that to break the ice.
Brilliant.
And that was perfect, right? And you talked about people going into hero mode, right? That's how I'll call it. But you got these people that are micromanaging, and they want to be a hero, or they don't trust the resources available to them. And there's a quote, and I believe it was a gentleman who ran for the U.S. presidency 25, 30 years ago, but he didn't get it. But he had a great quote, and it was, "If you surround yourself with brilliance, you cannot help but shine," right? And I really like that because I'm not the resident expert in anything. I mean, I'm a pretty good team builder, but I'm not the most technically savvy guy you'll ever meet. You're probably not the best pilot you'll ever meet. But if we recognize that we have pretty good basic skills, but we're surrounded by hordes of really sharp, really good people, well-meaning, smart, technically savvy, operationally savvy people, and that those resources belong to us in this moment, and we're allowed to utilize them to our fullest, then it's not, every problem is not so gigantic. It's not a mountain, or we haven't made a mountain out of the molehill there, right? So I think that's really critical to the mission completion, the operational and the job satisfaction, quality of life, all that. Knowing that you're surrounded by brilliant. One of the things I was really struck by coming to a corporate flight department, both Nissan and here where I currently am, is the level of knowledge in the pilot group, right? Because look, my history as a maintenance guy, right? Maintenance and crews have been duking it out for 100 years, right? Ever since Orville Wright took a swing at Wilbur, right? But it's because our perspectives are different, right? But I am astounded at the depth of knowledge and the basic skills that pilots have. And I'm old enough now that I can respect that and appreciate it, right? And I try not to step in their lane and say, I could have done that better. I get their perspective, my perspective, the team's perspective, and collectively go, this is probably the best way to move forward, right? I'm not driving that. The team's driving that. So once again, I think teamwork and utilizing the resources you have is just hugely beneficial.
Exactly. At the end of the day, I've heard that quoted by or mentioned by many top leaders, is that always make sure that you surround yourself with people better than you, and as a leader, you basically utilize on that. And again, we've all found that, and I'm sure all the listeners can name 100 different stories of finding somebody who's underconfident and they've found themselves in an elevated position, and effectively they've because they haven't worked out what their limitations are, they've set their bar very low, and their way of protecting themselves is to kick anybody else who's coming up anywhere near them, rather than I use a two ladder approach as opposed to one ladder approach. If you're intrinsically scared, you'll stay on the 1 or 2 level ladder and you'll try and kick people down. But if you're confident, you say, well, why don't you put your ladder up there and we'll see how far we can push each other up the top. And then you just end up in a healthy competition. Okay, let's go higher. And that's really what confidence is about. But being and typical blokes, I refer to this all the time, we're intrinsically not socialised to admit mistakes, but that's the thing we need to address very much in our modern society, is be willing to admit mistakes, because otherwise it kills. Not only in aeroplanes, it kills people. Put ropes around their neck. We've talked about suicide before. I'm very geared towards trying to sort the suicide problem out. Everything else that comes even before that absolutely awful final ending, we need to sort it out. And I think not being afraid to make mistakes, owning up, no blame, the just culture, as we talk about in aviation, is a very good model. The whole discipline of aviation is a very good model, I think, for the way I live my life. And I know that you feel the same. And we could talk about this forever and ever, but we've got to wrap it up, Ed. So it's been absolutely fantastic.
If I can close on one comment, I mean, I'm recently in my 60s here. I've been in aviation for 42 years, and I am living proof that you can succeed if you lean on the resources available to you. And I am absolutely sitting here living proof. I'm not an expert at anything, but I know how to find experts, and I know how to get them to get on my cause and help me succeed. And to the point now where people think I'm a good director of maintenance, right? And they seek my opinion. But it's a collection of multiple opinions over a 40-year career span and experiences. And it's not, I'm amazing. I know how to reach the amazing people and have them help the team move things forward. So it's been a remarkable run. And, you know, I've met wonderful people like you, Ben, and I can't thank you enough for asking me to be on your show. And more importantly, for your candor and your honesty and your professionalism for the 5 years we had the opportunity to work together. So, you know, I think the world needs people like that and people that are looking to help others and pay it forward. And yeah, I'm here and really enjoyed spending an hour with you, big guy.
Brilliant, mate. Well, hopefully there'll be plenty more of these as well, and I'd love to work with you one day. But you likewise, it's very easy to blow smoke up each other's backside, but we need to. Blokes are not very good at that, and I think we need to acknowledge excellence. That's a sign of good, confident leadership and confident individuals. So it's great, mate. Really appreciate you coming on. Your enthusiasm as well I walk away with a big step. A big positive step now, and let's pass that on to the next generation. Anybody else that wants to listen. So, till the next time, mate. I look forward to it. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I want to close with just one liner for you, and that's, you know, it's pertinent to almost every facet of life and every facet of operations, even marriages and children and anything, finances, whatever. Do not take a permanent solution to a temporary set of problems. Right.
That's a brilliant way to finish.